All right, it's just a little after 5:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone who's joining us for the Birds of Central and South America this evening. I saw a little bit of Erik and Matt's presentation yesterday, and I'm super excited about it. There's just a lot of really wonderful pictures of beautiful birds that are pleasant to look at while we have winter here, especially. And so just so folks know, this isn't a webinar format. So for anyone that's, joining us for the first time, we cannot see or hear you at all. So don't worry about that. You can communicate with us and with your fellow webinar attendees through the Zoom chat and Q&A functions. So if you have any technical difficulty at all tonight, please put your questions in the chat. We might be putting resources in there later if there's some questions about anything that Erik or Matt say, and any resources we can provide. And then you can always, as you think of questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the Q&A and we will get to them at the end. So just briefly for new folks, we are the Missouri River Bird Observatory. And as you can see from our main logo, we largely work in the state of Missouri, a little bit in eastern Kansas as well, but we're certainly concerned about birds all over the world and the birds that we share with Central and South America via migration. So our mission is the conservation of birds and their habitats through science, education, and advocacy. And you can always check out more on our website. This is our homepage. So I just wanted to point out for folks that if you just go to mrbo.org and click this 2020 webinar series button, you can see webinars. We're about to post some more for the new year. We are doing a second part of this South American and Central American birds presentation on the 29th, so after Christmas. And then we'll be having more in 2021. You can also watch all of our previous webinars as well if you kind of go through the calendar that comes up and go back to previous dates. So some resources for you there. I'm happy and excited to introduce our speakers tonight are Erik Oost, MRBO's field project leader. Erik has been with us for 4 years, and also Matt Longabaugh, who is in Kansas right now. He has worked for us on 3 different field seasons as a biological technician. So with no further introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Erik first. Thanks, guys, very much for doing this.
Thanks, Dana. And thanks, everybody, for wanting to spend your evening learning about some South America and Central America birds this evening. So I think it is worth first just starting and prefacing with this webinar is that with the fact that South America birds is such a huge topic, and there's so many birds, 3,000 birds in South America. So it's trying to tackle how to approach going over South America birds is pretty difficult. And so Matt and I had decided, since both he and I have been to South America and Central America both twice or multiple times. Matt's been there to Costa Rica several times. And so we figured it best to kind of maybe highlight and showcase some of the birds that we saw in our kind of ecosystems and environments that we spent our time in. So for me, that's going to be Bolivia this time, this webinar, and Matt, Costa Rica. And then next webinar is going to be Peru for me, and Matt went to Ecuador this past winter, and then Ethan will be joining us to kind of show us some Galapagos trip highlights. So that's just kind of the format, how we're going to approach this. So first, to kind of give you some background, which I think is essential for kind of understanding South America, is I found this good map. I can kind of see if I can zoom in a little. No, it doesn't really work. But this map does a great job showing the climate regions of South America. And so, a lot of people might think that the Amazon is a bulk the Amazon rainforest is a bulk of what South America is comprised of. But as you can see on this map here, I mean, tropical wet and the semi-arid area here is quite a big bulk of the area, and you have the Andes Mountains here, which is the highlands, the arid regions down in Patagonia. So kind of all this variety of climate kind of helps provide a good recipe for diversity. That coupled with the fact that the equator runs through a good portion of South America, and you have 27 tons of dust coming from the desert every year, carried over the Atlantic, and that settles in the Amazon basin. So all these kind of variables kind of help just make this a hotspot for birds and wildlife in general. So now I want to show you a PowerPoint I got here for you, and kind of to support what I was getting at with diversity. This slide, I pulled some facts together that really show how diverse South America is. And so, as I mentioned before, over 3,000 birds of the world's 10,000 bird species are in South America, with over 100 different bird families, so many that we don't have here in the United States, but many of them shared. 4 out of 17 of the countries in the world that are designated as megadiverse countries exist within South America. And what that means is that they have more than 5,000 endemic plant species. So plant species occurring nowhere else except within the area in the country, or even a smaller area just within a region. And so those are Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela. And as you probably recognize, a couple of those countries are some of the top birding locations too. So they kind of go hand in hand. And so amount of biodiversity that Latin America has is about 1/3 of the global diversity. And Latin America and South America, is less than 15% of land mass in the world too. So that's quite a big number, but that also could include some aquatic marine diversity on the coasts. But this is also interesting. So much still needs to be researched. So there was a study, I like that this is Bolivia related. In 2017, there was a 3-year study from 2015 to 2017. Researchers found 4,000 new species in a national park in Bolivia. And I have a map coming up, you'll be able to see that area. It's in kind of the Amazon forest, rainforest kind of edge of it. And so researchers estimate at least 3 times more plant species than are already known. So it's just a mecca for new plants with pharmaceutical benefits and other medicinal properties that are left to be untapped. But it's worth mentioning, and I don't think I need to tell you guys all this, but it's just something that has to be said. This Amazon and just habitat and wildlife in South America is probably in a worse shape than it is here, and how bad it is here, and it's for similar reasons. So habitat loss, agriculture expansion. You hear everything in the news about the palm oil. So there's just a lot of things that are kind of trying to combat this, and so we want to shed some light on the habitat and birds here that call this home, because it also hosts some of our species here, of course. So I'm going to go over birds of Bolivia's northern lowlands. So that's where I spent 3 months of my time. I'll get into that a little more detail, but the flag background colors, they have red, orange, and green stripes there. So why Bolivia? I volunteered on a Búfalo de Macaw conservation project there. So the Búfalo de Macaw pictured here is an endangered species endemic to north central Bolivia. So there's estimated less than 500 individuals left. And you could see why. It's people use them, natives would use them for headdresses, but often more it was for pet trade and habitat loss are the main reasons for this bird's decline. And so I lived and worked in the same kind of environment that this bird would live in, which is tropical savanna habitat. So prior to a lot of deforestation, it would have been tropical rainforest, but it's now kind of turned into a savanna. And so another reason why I chose Bolivia is birding in Bolivia is increasing, but still unpopular. So it's kind of still a lot of the populations of these species are not known very well, or the ranges. And also for very little cost, someone can travel and bird in Bolivia. So it's really cheap there. And you know, your dollar could go a long way. So you could really see a lot of birds in a place that's relatively untrafficked compared to other hot spots in South America. So they actually have a Bolivia Northern Lowlands field guide, or not really field guide, but a Merlin bird ID list. And with that, you can use your photo ID. If you take a photo, then you can put it, ask Merlin, and it'll ID it pretty accurately. But on there, it shows 905 birds, which is quite a bit considering it's a small area. I'll show you that in just a second. But the country itself has more than 1,300 birds, 14 endemics, and just like a few other South American countries, the national bird is the Andean condor. There at the bottom right, you can see that field guide that just came out in 2016. That's how new kind of birding is in Bolivia. Also, to give you some more background on habitat and kind of geo-referencing, on the far right, you can see a map of Bolivia, and that pin is where I was staying. And then if you move over to the central map, this shows some climate or habitat. So it's basically showing it's a grassland, savanna, shrubland habitat, but it kind of comes up to Amazon tropical forests and Pacific tropical forests. And then on the far left, I've kind of circled the area in black that these birds can be found in, and it's basically tropical savanna habitat mixed in with monsoon. So where I was had a lot of flash flooding in the rainy season, and then even in the dry season, there'd be some bouts of rain, but it could get pretty dry. This is what some of the habitat look like. So that's the road in the top left photo. That's the road coming in, just a dirt road. And then we'll go clockwise. Then the top right, that's just kind of the habitat right in the back of where I stayed. These two seeds are from, or fruits are from palm trees, and these are two of the three main food sources of the blue-throated macaw. And they both of them have kind of like an orange, fleshy, almost like mango-like texture, a little tougher, but still kind of tropical tasting, and it's edible for humans too. And so sometimes part of my job was to find a lot of this fruit out in the bush and bring it in, because we had some blue-throated macaws that we were rehabbing, and they were trying to they had a few that were trying to get into a mating program. And so we had to find a lot of food there because we kept some blue-throated macaws on site. And so we had to go out in the field and scavenge for these. So we'd have to climb up trees and shake them down, cut down the fruits. And then the bottom left picture is my crew and I, when we were nest searching for blue-throated macaw nests. They like to nest in cavities in trees. And so there's this big, there's extendable pole here with a camera, like a GoPro attached to it. And then there's a display monitor that we're viewing down below on the ground, and we can get light shining in there to see if obviously it's dark in there, so we can see if there's anything in there. And sometimes there have been, but we never found a blue-throated macaw nest in the wild. But there were some in some artificial nest boxes that were created, which were pretty neat. And there's just a close-up shot of blue-throated macaw. So I want to first show you some of the macaws and parrots that you'll see there. So all these photos are ones that I've taken, and so there, way more birds that can be shown, but I just want to show you a few that I got decent shots of, and we'll go over a few kind of a variety of families. So there's blue and yellow macaw, and you can tell it doesn't have that blue throat that the blue-throated macaw has. That helps differentiate it between that one. Red and green macaw, a real iconic bird in South America. Chestnut-fronted macaws, these guys were all in the cavities when we were checking them for nests, and they like to hang out together and pop their head out. So chestnut-fronted macaws. Yellow-collared macaws. Oftentimes while I was there with the project, I would conduct surveys, and so we would walk the roads, and the parrots would be swarming the roads, and it was pretty rural Bolivia, and there were just ranches. People just had ranches out there, and they always knew. You saw a gringo out there, what we were up to, just looking for birds. White-eyed parakeet. They were all usually in flocks as well. It was interesting, the blue and yellow macaws like to roost with the black vultures at night, and there was a big swarm of these guys coming in, maybe like 20, all landing in an adjacent tree. Black-collared hawk, laughing falcon. This bird's really cool, and it kind of has a laughing call, and it'll just have a high-pitched kind of kick call that it does repeatedly. And kind of similar to our Cooper's hawk call. Roadside hawk, they would always just perch on the side of the road up on posts, this power post all the time. And Matt's shaking his head. He knows they're doing that. Slate-collared hawk, look at those brilliant orange legs, that yellow eye. Yellow-headed caracara. We also have, there's a southern caracara down here, and occasionally we'll have crested caracara come up into the United States, but southern caracara is one that doesn't get further north of like central Peru. Lesser yellow-headed vulture, southern screamer, doing what its name implies. They like to sit on the top of the trees and scream. There's a few different types of these guys. They're pretty, kind of the size of a turkey or so, maybe a little smaller. Speckled chacalaca. A lot of wading birds, green ibis, limpkins. We have limpkins in North America, but they're pretty, they're quite present all throughout Bolivia, wherever I went, where there was some water. Wild jacanas, these guys were even more prolific. These guys were just all around the main city, the closest city, all in the gutters. These guys would be walking on the lily pads. Gray-cowled wood rail, so kind of like our rails, and just like our rails, they have a very funny run, and these guys prefer a little bit more kind of up away from the water, not as much in the water like the rails and the reeds. These guys will be a little bit less obscured, and so then when you see them, and they see more and more when they see you, then they'll scatter, and it's really funny seeing them run. Maguari stork, just a really elegant stork, and I was really treated to see this guy because I only saw one of them while I was down there. Less common than the wood stork that is down there as well, and we have those, of course. Tons of nice herons, capped heron, beautiful heron. Looks like it should be, kind of in the night heron group, but it does not hunt at all at night. Same with the whistling heron. That actually nested right in the trees above, near where I was staying there on the field site. Rufescent tiger heron. These guys were all over the place. Then you had a bunch of kingfishers, green kingfisher. They have Amazon, ringed kingfisher. So this is kind of just like our belted kingfisher, but kind of that rufous all over, and much bigger than a belted. Neotropic cormorant was a popular one that we can get in Missouri occasionally, which is a treat to see. Large-billed tern flew over. Where I was staying, we had an agreement with the landowner he had fish farms on his property. So there were big excavated holes of, that he would then fill up with water and then fish. And so this tern decided to hunt there for a few seconds, allowing me to get my camera. And on one walk, when I was out in the bush, I found 3 owls, and I hadn't found any owls since while I was there. But just on a 3-hour walk in the middle of the day, we had Fruginus pygmy owl, tropical screech owl, and barn owl. There are so many of these guys, it was hard for me to keep them straight. There are dozens of species in South America. And so there's pale-vented pigeon, and this guy eats exclusively berries. And this picture doesn't quite show it, but he's got a really nice purple and red and blue tones that are iridescent, and it probably likely to all that rich berry diet, the colors. Pacui ground dove. And we have woodpeckers, crimson crested woodpeckers. The woodpeckers are really funky looking compared to the ones we have here. They all look as funky as our pileated. Pale crested woodpecker, and then black-tailed Tataira. This guy's pretty interesting. I was reading about their breeding behaviors, and they will breed at different times of the year depending on where they are, and it could spanning all year round. So some places they will breed in December, some places they'll breed from April to July, and so they have a pretty large range. And it's just interesting and shows that we don't really know, they don't have the same type of breeding patterns that our birds here in North America have, where it's all based on seasonality. And some ornithologists kind of argue that it's more opportunistic that their breeding is. The iconic fork-tailed flycatcher. This guy was awesome to see. He was really far away, but I managed to get a shot. That tail dwarfs the scissor tails when in comparison. The great Kiskadee. These guys are prolific, and they, as their name kind of suggests, they have a call that's like Kiskadee. These guys are all over South America. Cattle tyrants, and these guys were on cattle. Sure enough, wherever I saw these cattle tyrants, they were on cattle. Sure enough. Variegated flycatcher. Rufous-tailed jacamar. I think Matt has a better picture of this than I, but it's kind of like a bee eater. I think of them as just big hummingbirds because they have the iridescent green feathers and that kind of long pointy black bill. But it's not like a hummingbird. It'll really snatch a lot of insects and it'll whack their wings on the branches to get rid of their wings first before they eat them. Just really cool type of bird. Relatively small, 6 inches, 7 inches or so in length, and just act like a flycatcher where they'll go out, hunt, and come back to the same part on the limb. Matt helped me ID this one. You can barely make this guy out there, but it's a toady flycatcher. And so it's just like it's kind of like a kinglet, but like a flycatcher version of a kinglet. And so it's a plump little bird with a real long, sturdy bill for getting insects. And you could really see that rusty color coming through with this photo. Then we have great ant shrike, the male and the female. And these guys are part of the antbird family. And these antbirds will feast primarily on the ground, insects on the ground, like ants. And you guys know ants South America has tons of ants. If you haven't been there, you'll find that out. And so there are a lot of ant birds. Well, a few, actually, I think I read more than double-digit ant bird species that follow army ants, rows of army ants, or a line of army ants. And as the army ants move in their line and make their line at the front, they start spooking insects nearby, and the ant birds will go and pick and clean up the other insects that the ants will flush out, which is pretty neat. And this is my favorite one right here. It's a barred ant shrike, and it just looks like a zebra bird. And he really liked to stay in the shrub right out around the field house. Fawn-breasted wren, also part of the antbird family. Black-capped Donychobius, it's in its own family. Then we get into wood creepers, kind of like our brown creeper that we have here. There's gobs of these species, like, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 types at least, I would say, when looking at South America. There's narrow-billed wood creeper, buff-throated wood creeper. Here's another buff-throated wood creeper, and this one I had to put because it had a big spider. And olivaceous wood creeper with another spider. So they're pretty successful. And then also yellow-chinned spinetail, somewhat closely related. You can kind of make out that yellow chin. There's a lot of mockingbirds down there. There were two in the region where I was. Chalk brown mockingbird was a more common one. Then there were trogons. This was the only common one in my area, blue crown trogon, and then the female here. So the difference being that the female has more of this gray, while the male has this green and blue. A few different types of cuckoo. So this is the Gira cuckoo. I just really like this guy because he has that real green face and that orange mohawk. It's just really really cool, pretty different. Then kind of like little juncos, grayish baywing, were all around feeding on the ground in small flocks. Other blackbirds like Chopi blackbird, that could also kind of be lumped in with all the orpangulas and caciques, like the yellow rump cacique. And what this guy will do was he'll kind of perch on one of the branches, and then will swing down as they make their song, and they'll swing their whole body down, kind of as like a pendulum, and then they'll come back up. Purplish jay, it was real backlit, but it was the only one I was able to see of a purplish jay. And then this really cool plush crested jay. Just he's pretty wet, but a really alien looking bird. There's so many tanagers in South America. I know Matt has some really good shots of tanagers, way better than these type of shots. But a few different types. I mean, I had hooded tanagers were there, sayaka tanagers, palm tanagers, like this guy sitting on a palm. They were pretty common. But just the whole family itself is just huge. And then line seed eater, these guys are actually in the same tanager family. I just really like this guy, a really nice face, strikingly contrasting face. Another seed eater, white-bellied seed eater. Then red-crested cardinal, red-capped cardinal, and they look pretty different to me, despite just having the capped and crested being different. And then saffron finch, really brilliant yellow bird that kind of similar to our yellow warbler in its colors, will hang around. Hooded siskin, all the siskins down there in South America are nicely colored. And this one was as well, despite it not being in focus all the way. Here's another one, thick-billed Euphonia. He had some nesting material. It was interesting that some of the birds were nesting and some of them were not while down there. So it just shows that they don't all breed at the same time based off certain seasonality circumstances. Like certain plants start blooming doesn't trigger all the birds to start breeding. It might trigger just a select few that depend on that food. And then this is glittering bellied emerald. I didn't get many hummingbird shots, but you guys probably know there's 300 plus hummingbird species in South America, and Bolivia has a bunch, but nowhere near as many as Costa Rica or Peru, Ecuador up there. But it was a really nice trip there, and I would have liked to travel and see the other parts and get see other environments. But it was also part of kind of a job. But it was nice. I got to know the environment there pretty well, and get a sense of what birds are using the habitat, and less so just transients that I would maybe see if I was birding in an area that we get migrants or something. So it kind of felt nice. It was different. And so with that, then I'm gonna kind of trade with Matt, and he's gonna talk about his experience in Costa Rica.
Okay, am I on?
Yep.
You are.
Okay, let's see. So here's me in Costa Rica. This is January 2019. So the first time I went to Costa Rica was 2015. I got hired at a little nature center up in the mountains. I originally went because I was interested in entomology. I really wanted to be a bug scientist. And so this kind of insect themed nature center up in the mountains was like a dream come true. But the director there was a diehard birder, and she got me into birding, and here I am. So really kind of my life's work now, I kind of owe all to that Costa Rica trip I took in the winter of 2015. So I loved it so much, I went back and worked for them again in 2018, 2019. I was kind of situated up here in Monteverde. And during time off, I'd travel as much as I could around the country. What I didn't get I didn't get the opportunity to go kind of down the southern end of the country here. So while all the birds that I hope you like coming up are all from this northern, I mean, really just the northern half of the country. This Caribbean coast here is really, really diverse. Tortuguero National Park is one of my favorite places on earth now. Kind of the resplendent quetzals and all the hummingbirds folks love to see here, kind of in the mountains here. Northwest Costa Rica is all dry savanna, actually. So this is really, really unique habitat. This is dry and scrubby and thorny. And then kind of down here, down in the peninsula, Osa Peninsula by Panama, really just, there's no roads, there's no towns. This is pristine jungle down here. So hopefully next time I go back, what I'd like to visit is the Osa Peninsula down here. This is where virtually all of Costa Rica's harpy eagles are down here. There's a gob of hummingbirds that I've never seen down kind of the southern end of the country. So I just wanted to give you a picture of kind of where I had been, and really I've only seen half the country. Okay, so diversity. There are about 900 birds in Costa Rica. That is about as many as the United States. So just imagine every bird in the United States crammed into West Virginia, and it'll give you a sense of how diverse Costa Rica is in bird life. It's the highest species density of any country in North, Central, or South America. 7 species of birds live in Costa Rica and nowhere else. However, there are 73 more that only live in Costa Rica and Panama, which is just absurd. And like I said, most of those are down in the southern end of the country. So really just a treasure trove of species. 2 families that I think kind of show this really well are hummingbirds and flycatchers. So Costa Rica has 50 hummingbird species, including our ruby-throated hummingbird. Most of the kind of Western US hummingbirds that you think of, like black-chinned and those, don't really go that far south. So barring some of the oddballs in kind of Southeast Arizona, ruby-throated really is the only kind of US hummingbird that you'll see a lot of in Costa Rica. And then there's flycatchers. So I picked 2 bird groups that people love and hate. There are 82 flycatcher species in Costa Rica. Flycatchers are the largest family. The most has more species, more flycatchers than any other group, not only in Costa Rica, but in the Americas in general. So it's just a maddening number of similar flycatchers. So this social flycatcher here looks, I don't remember if you remember the great kiskadee from Erik. It looks very similar, but there's 7 or 8 more kind of yellow-bellied, black and white headed, similarly shaped flycatchers in Costa Rica. And it's tough birds to ID. Fun or terrible, it depends how you look at it. Here's just a few photos of birds that the US shares with Costa Rica. It was fun to see great blue herons kind of clambering through mangroves. Is a broad-winged hawk that we see in Kansas and Missouri during migration. And here they were on their way to the US. I had 3,000 broad-winged hawks this day on the Caribbean coast. I was just standing there on the beach, just counting and taking pictures of these broad-winged hawks as they kind of flew by, just in total whirlwinds as they kind of moved up the coast on the way to the US. Wilson's warbler is probably the most numerous and most widespread North American warbler in Costa Rica. I mean, they're absolutely everywhere. But most of our migrant warblers live throughout Costa Rica. Just kind of barring the highlands. I mean, you could see just about any North American warbler in most of the middle or low elevation habitats throughout Costa Rica. Here I am, December 31st, 2018. At the Nature Center, we had this big chalkboard. And so any of the biologists there, whenever they saw a bird on property, they'd mark it down on the chalkboard. So this is December 1st, right after I had wiped it off. I look a little excited. And this is 5 a.m. on January 1st, 2019, after I had heard the first bird of the new year was a lessons mott calling early in the morning. And then I filled it out a little more over the next few days. That chalkboard there is my baby. So there's a few families that we don't have any representatives of in North America, like motts here. So they're related to kingfishers, and kind of you can tell by their bill and body shape, but they're unique to Latin America. So they kind of dig these really, really deep holes, just like a kingfisher might. But sometimes these holes will be 4 to 6 feet deep in banks. And then they'll come out and sit on a perch and look for lizards to eat. They're pretty beloved just because they have a lot of character. They'll sit totally motionless except for their tail. So the long tail, they'll wag back and forth like a clock, and they'll pause between each time they wag it. Just real beautiful birds, interesting behavior. So I was really happy. That was my first bird of 2019. Here's just some more photos from around those middle elevations up in the mountains there. White-eared ground sparrow has a really restricted range in Costa Rica. So we had a lot of birders coming through, targeting this sparrow. This is a blue vented hummingbird. So I didn't take very many hummingbird photos in Costa Rica either. And it was largely in thanks to this jerk who really voraciously guarded our garden. We had several other species visit, but this individual chased him off. I mean, long before I could get a photo of anything else. Yellow-faced grass squid is a tiny little bird that kind of lives in the long grass of middle elevations. Has kind of a grasshopper sparrow-like call. And then here's the pièce de résistance, the resplendent quetzal. This is the best photo I could manage in almost 9 months of living in Costa Rica. This is the best I could do. I saw plenty and I heard plenty call. This is as close as I got to one. He kind of parked himself in that cecropia tree over our nature center and hung out for the better part of a day, but it was raining the entire time. And I think I took this through my binoculars, so I didn't destroy my camera, but I'll have to go back and get a better shot because they are beautiful, beautiful birds. So moving east from there, this is Tortuguero National Park on the Caribbean coast. And I put this picture in here, kind of give you a sense of the habitat. So much of Tortuguero National Park had been logged in the past. So it's a kind of a spider web of canals between the Tortuguero River and the Caribbean Sea. And so there's all of these flooded canals, just vegetation absolutely everywhere, wildlife absolutely everywhere, iguanas, American crocodiles all over the place. This is an adult male green basilisk lizard. Poison dart frogs, so thick you have to watch where you step so you don't squish a little poison dart frog. And inundated with waders, green herons out the wazoo, and then on the beach, next to the ocean there, have shorebirds, have whimbrels, sanderlings, tiger herons. There's also boat-billed herons, agami herons, great blue herons, little blue herons, frigate birds in the air. I mean, at any given time, hundreds of magnificent frigate birds soaring through the air. These have like a 6 or 7 foot wingspan. I mean, these things are absolute monsters. Northern jacanas. So jacanas are a group of birds that live all over the world. We don't get them in the U.S. very often. I think there was one that kind of wandered into Arizona this summer, and it was one of these. It was a northern jacana. So these, you'll see the feet on this guy. They'll walk on floating vegetation, and their weight is spread out so much of their huge feet that they can walk on floating plants without sinking. And so they'll build their nests on floating plants, and the females will have 4 or 5 different males that she'll mate with, and she'll protect their territory. The female will patrol the territories of the male, to keep all of her many husbands happy and safe. So whack them into submission with their wings sometimes too. Really, really interesting social structure in jacanas. Oh, here's one, sure enough, right on the plants. Purple gallinules, beautiful, beautiful birds. One of the most sensitive birds in Tortuguero is these great green macaws. And similar to the macaws that Erik was talking about, I mean, it's all pet trade and habitat loss has taken its toll on these great green macaws. And thankfully, there's good efforts to help them out there. And then my personal favorite, maybe my favorite bird in all of Costa Rica, is this aninga. So this one had a little chick. When I guess I visited Tortuguero twice, once in 2018 and once in 2019, just a few months later, and all these aningas were fledging and just gorgeous birds. Several colorful local common names for them. I heard piano keys bird tossed around a lot, referring to the white feathers on their back. Snake bird was also a common one, because they'll swim like a submarine with its periscope up. Their entire body will be underwater except for the head. So snake bird. And then this one posed pretty for me. Moving west from there, I stayed at La Selva Biological Station for about a week. It's 3 days on either side of my birthday. So I was like a kid in a candy store. Green ibis, keel-billed toucans there. La Selva has some of the highest species density of any location in Costa Rica. I mean, this one biological station alone had, I think, upwards of 400 bird species just on biological station grounds there. It's absolutely absurd. This is a colored aracari. So aracaris are a group of small toucans, and instead of, you know, these nice Fruit Loop looking colors, they're always black and yellow and red. So they're really sinister looking. There are some that have jagged edges on their upper mandible. So they look just like evil toucans, but they're so cool. This is a rufous-tailed jacamar. This is the same species that Erik had. Crested guan. This is essentially a turkey. Great tinamou is kind of like a chicken. So these tinamous are one of the oldest bird families alive, and a lot of them call at night. These really, really spooky, kind of forlorn wails they'll do throughout the night. And I was very lucky to get one walking around during the day. This is a white-whiskered puffbird. Puffbirds are another family that obviously we don't have any puffbirds in the U.S. Just like the antbirds, puffbirds will follow army ant swarms, never actually eating the ants, just eating these scorpions and lizards and insects that army ants are flushing as they move through the forest. And so I countless times, you'd think I have learned I'll notice that I'm in a great little pocket of birds. I thought, man, I don't know what I just wandered into, but there's so many birds in the trees. I got this great picture of a white whiskered puffbird, and then my legs are on fire, and then I realize why. I have ants in my pants because that's why all the birds were there, because they're following this army ant swarm. I think really a critical part of South American birding is investigating army ant swarm attendees. This is a great curacao. This again, turkey. Think like a turkey of the trees. Females are kind of brown, just huge, gorgeous birds. So that curacao is in a family with guans and chachalacas. This is another really ancient group of birds. I mean, I saw a theory that this family of birds is over 60 million years old. So we get this plain chachalaca in Texas, just barely along the Rio Grande. But there's 55 or 54 other species throughout Central and South America, and usually they're loud. Often they're pretty skittish birds. They're pretty big. This black guan here is my favorite. Pretty sharp looking. And that is about all I have for now. So really, when we kind of pitched the idea with this, we told ourselves that rather than saying we're going to do a webinar on all the birds of South America, that we're going to have to say we're going to do a webinar on some of the birds of South America. So, I mean, really, this is just a tiny little taste of what Erik and I have experienced. This blue-footed booby is a little teaser. So part 2 is, like Dana said earlier, is going to be on December 29th, where we're going to talk about the birds of Peru and Ecuador. And we hope to see you there. And if there's any questions or comments, lay them on us.
Erik and Matt, Matt, I saw you answered a question in the Q&A earlier, right? And then there were a couple more, and I just want to jump in. I want to ask Erik a question about that roadside hawk, the pair that you showed. The one is sitting on top of something. Was that that bird's nest, or was that something else?
I think it was something else.
Okay.
I've never seen it go into there, but it always liked to perch up there. I think like a parakeet used that.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
Because I don't think they use that mud. I was thinking that too. They don't use that. The hawk wouldn't use that mud.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, but just the way the bird was perched right on top of that, I just had to ask.
But yeah. I never saw, though. I don't think it was inhabited.
So I think that this question that came in from Dan, it appeared to come in right at the end of Erik's part, which was, what was the scope of your project and what were the results?
Sure. So what I was volunteering for an organization that is somewhat similar to Merbos in the sense that they conduct some research and education. And so my role was to be there to help with all kind of fieldwork duties that we had, which were, since we had 4 blue-throated macaws that we were, I guess, trying to gauge if they were going to be worthy for breeding, a breeding practice or attempt. And so they were getting some cages built that we'd help build cages for them in the back that they would have, breeding areas. And so a lot of it was upkeep of like making sure the blue-throated macaws stay healthy and alive. And so every day we had to be there to kind of take care. So a lot of it was like husbandry of these guys, and looking for food was a big thing because it's expensive to have food for them. So a lot of it was just on the volunteers, which was just myself and another person, to go out and find food for these guys. So a lot of the day was out walking around looking for food. And then occasionally we'd go out into the bush like 2 hours, 3 hours away, despite it being really only like 50 miles. It was really underdeveloped roads. Then we would, spend a week or two out there nest searching, or we do like habitat restoration, native plant plantings, and then kind of throughout the kind of volunteering experience, we would survey the surrounding area just for monitoring the birds that are just present that we see. So we didn't really have a kind of like a research design or kind of plan that we were adhering to. We were just kind of monitoring, and then going out nest monitoring. If we found something, then we would stake it out. We had spatial data for everything and pictures, and we would check certain cavities like at different times in different areas, based off the project leader. And so we'd cycle around and then document where they had activity or where they were confirmed to be nesting. And yeah, it was basically just like that for 3 months.
And Matt, can you comment a little bit about what you were like, what a typical day was at the nature center where you were actually working there in Costa Rica?
Yeah. I mean, most of it was guided tours. So we had like a little indoor nature center with a lot of live insects. I mean, we had a couple scorpion species, a couple tarantula species, walking sticks, leaf mimicking katydids, Hercules beetles. And so we'd give a little tour of the indoor nature center, and we had kind of outdoor gardens with native Costa Rica butterflies and native plants. And so just kind of tours of the nature center and tours of the grounds. So a lot of it, I mean, it was very heavily insect and plant focused. But I mean, there's always, always other critters along the way.
Cool. I'm not seeing any more questions, I don't think. I'm looking at the chat. There's some nice comments to you guys in the chat, and I certainly second them. And Ethan's on as well, and obviously we were both on mute because we were laughing and saying things like "whoa" when you all showed pictures. So that was super, super enjoyable. Thank you so much for doing that. So with that, at 6:30, I guess we'll let people go, and hopefully we'll see and be together on the 29th.
There's one more question.
Oh, good. Go ahead. I just saw it just now too.
So Dan, I'm going to answer this with respect to Costa Rica. Personally, I like to go in the winter months when all of our birds are going to be down there. What, 25, 30% of Costa Rica's birds, at least, are North American migrants. So I like going down there during the winter months, just because there's more species and more birds, and I really like to kind of see the familiar faces. he asked when the best time of year to visit was. And, you know, the weather, Costa Rica has a rainy season and a dry season. So that may change your view, but I like to see the North American migrants there.
I would say it's easiest to go in the dry season. You don't have to worry about roads and you losing access or being stranded because during the rainy season, I mean, you can't cross areas for weeks then after some time. So, and I don't know how it is everywhere, but it tends to be kind of like December through March is rainy season down there. And then, the June is a good time to go, I would say, in the dry season, if you want to go to the Amazon or to like the Andes. That was a good time. In June it's their winter, so if you're there in the non-Amazon part, it could be kind of chilly, but that also could be kind of nice. It was really dramatic changing from Andes to Amazon when I was in Peru. So, and that was in June. But yeah, I would say anytime in the dry season, I think that tends to be like a really popular time to go. But I don't know exactly bird wise, specifically where. I would check all the birding, like just look up birding tours and see when all of them offer birding tours, because they know their stuff. They're going to offer it when they're going to be able to, keep promises on the most amount of birds and select birds. So I would check to see when they offer it.
Based on comments in the chat, it looks like that's going to become part of your job, actually. Merbo mounts a trip to Central/South America with Matt and Eric as our travel guides.
All right, I'll practice. I'll practice my Spanish on my Duolingo app. We'll get that. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night and Merry Christmas as well. And we'll see you after Christmas.